What's going on? This Theo Gremminger, aka the OG Fantasy, back at it. Week 11 waiver wire season is flying by. Wild Monday Night Football game last night. Very weird game. Tilting if you were a James Cook manager. I mean, a Bills fan in general. This was just been a season that's unexpected, and I think that just shows you that we don't know how the NFL season is going to play out. When Buffalo was steamrolling Miami, it looked like, hey, the Bills are the team right now. They steamroll the Miami Dolphins. Then they take a little trip to London, lose to Jacksonville. It's been choppiness ever since. It's been a weird team. But hey, we're gonna roll with the punches here. And an offensive coordinator change, going from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady. Well, I don't want to get too far off topic because you guys are here for waivers, but there was a time when Joe Brady was like the like smartest man in football. He had the LSU offense completely rolling. Everybody thought that this was like the greatest offensive coordinator that they've seen. New concepts, everybody out in space scoring all these touchdowns. Then he gets the early opportunity to go to the NFL, and it just kind of goes south. And these things all come full circle. And now he has an opportunity to kind of turn things around really quickly with the Buffalo Bills. So a really cool side storyline. Definitely one, if you're just a football fan in general, to read about Joe Brady's rise and then fall and now rise again. That's some wild stuff. But we're here. It's the waiver wire, and I wish I could be more excited about this week, but I'm not really there right now. And we had a really good week last week. So if you watched this video last week, my number one waiver wire recommendation was, of course, Keaton Mitchell. And Keaton Mitchell just does Keaton Mitchell things again this week. Only plays 13 snaps, but scores a touchdown, has a 30-plus yard touchdown score, a 39-yarder, I believe. And then he also has a 32-yard reception. So Keaton Mitchell is coming. Like the Keaton Mitchell days where he's at least a flex for us are right around the corner. And I wouldn't be shocked if it's this Thursday evening against Cincinnati. Huge game for the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens have Super Bowl aspirations, and they're going up against a fellow team from the AFC North, rivalry type game. Just throw him in your lineup. Like, that's how kind of where I'm at with Keaton Mitchell. Like, the volume will be very frustrating, but I know that he can do a lot with a few touches. Whereas a lot of times this time of year, your flex play, you're kind of like unexcited to start them a lot. It might be like a floor play type. Keaton Mitchell's not that. He's a high ceiling flex play that could become a weekly RB2 for us. The snaps with Justice Hill, there's very, I think it's a very strong case that he just kind of dusts Justice Hill. It was 13 snaps this past week. I think this week you're going to see Keaton Mitchell go, 25 snaps, 20 snaps. And I think once he gets to that level, we're going to have a lot more confidence in him. But he is definitely not available to you. He's rostered everywhere. But last week we also hit on Demario Douglas. Again, not available to you this week. He's rostered everywhere. Josh Dobbs and Noah Brown. Noah Brown is the one who's still out there. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. But those four guys are all in my top 10. So I feel really good about the way the week went. And last week we had like the very difficult set of bye weeks. That was a tough one. Miami, Kansas City, Philadelphia, the Los Angeles Rams, like a bunch of guys that really affected our fantasy lineups. This week is a lot easier to take. Atlanta's on a bye. New England is on a bye. Indianapolis is on a bye. And the New Orleans Saints are on a bye. So you're way less affected this week in terms of like the truly elite players. Like obviously, you're going to miss Bijan Robinson and Alvin Kamara. You've been starting Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Taylor. So there's some running back impact. Michael Pittman, Chris Olave, locked in fantasy starters for you, but it's not even half as hard as what we had to deal with in week 10. But the week you really want to keep an eye on is week 13. Start planning this out now because Week 13 is going to be a must win for many of you to get into your fantasy playoffs. For some of you who have regular season money prizes, it's going to be a potential week where you need to win some money. And then you also have the fact that in a lot of leagues, the top 2 seeds get buys. And week 13 is a week that's going to be a week that you need to win in order to get to that 1 or 2 seed and get that bye week. So week 13, Baltimore, Buffalo, Chicago, Las Vegas, Minnesota, and the New York Giants all on buys. It's like Buy-Mageddon Part 2, except it's much worse than Buy-Mageddon Part 1 because it happens so late into the season. So, it's difficult for us to be like that far planning in advance in fantasy football. Like I sit here and I don't see your roster. I don't see your situations. Winning matters this week. Winning obviously matters every week, but we still want to keep an eye on those crazy bye weeks. It's going to end up saving you fab. It's going to save you headaches, and you don't want to have to be competing with your league mates in a specific, week. Also, if you're in a trading league and one of those guys is coming up, and you're relying on, if I'm in a situation where I'm like, I need points every single week, then making trade pivots for guys that do not have bye weeks anymore is an okay way to play this game. Knowing that for example, if you have Michael Pittman, who I believe is a high-end wide receiver 2 type, low-end wide receiver 1 type, potentially moving him and getting an extra week out of somebody else is not necessarily the worst way to play this game. That's a whole nother subject. This is all about the waiver wire. And this is a week where there's not a whole lot of players that are going to help you right away. This is more of a week where look at your roster and assess. Do I need somebody to plug and play this week? Do I need somebody to prevent my league mates from getting? Or do I need a guy who maybe in 3 weeks, 4 weeks will be a guy that could develop into a player that I'm going to play in the playoffs? There's different layers to waiver wires here. So your roster. I think that when we talk about the top 10 overall rankings, there's a couple guys towards the top of that list that you can plug and play this week, no doubt. But there's a number of other players in my top 10 that are more guys that you want on your roster. The one thing you want to think about this time of year is I don't want dead weight on my roster. If I'm carrying a guy on my roster, then it's for a reason. I don't mind handcuffing my own running backs. We've gotten to the point in the season where you know what your team is. If you have a winning team, handcuffing your own running back makes sense at this point. It's not early in the season where you want to have like all these different outs. Now you're planning for the playoffs. You need to plan for potentially missing a guy for a week or two and being able to plug somebody in. I also just do not want to have any like kind of dead weight. It's those players on your roster that are like roster cloggers. Those kind of guys, unexciting. If I'm holding a guy that's not scoring a lot on my roster, then I want that to be a lottery ticket type. We'll talk about some of the handcuff running backs. Rostering other people's handcuffs, perfectly fine if you have the roster space. But take a look, make sure that your roster has guys that you're excited about. And if you're unexcited about them, churn that back into your roster. You do not know what next week will bring. Last week, a guy like Ty Chandler, who we recommended right here on this waiver wire show, was kind of an afterthought. But now he gets his opportunity this week, and you're thrilled that you were able to churn your roster and grab a cheaper handcuff last week. So we're going to keep this thing going. Let's start out with the quarterback position. And this is a bad week for like quarterback position in general for waiver wire. The players that I recommend to you are players that are available in 75% or more of Yahoo leagues. And if not, it's going to be a shallow. And again, I don't know your league. So your league might be a shallow league. And those leagues have their own challenges. Some of you might be in leagues where you have 14 total players rostered. Some of you might be in leagues where you have 20 players rostered. Some of you might be in leagues where you have like 22 players rostered. I don't know your league, but there's going to be something for everybody at the other positions. But when it comes to quarterback, there's not a whole lot out there if you're in a deep format. That's just the lay of the land here. There are certain situations you can look at and potentially dumpster dive. Guys are cut. I don't know which guys have been cut in your league, but when it comes to the quarterback position, this is really short for me. I love giving out a ton of names, but this week I don't really have anybody to talk about. The one quarterback that I do think is interesting this week, he's a shallow league ad. He's available in 41% of Yahoo leagues, or excuse me, 59% of Yahoo leagues. He's only rostered in 41% of them. But I know when I look through like my FFPC leagues, he's available in a number of those as well. So I think he's a player that a lot of fantasy managers kind of moved on from, and he could be sitting out there on your waiver wire, and that's Matthew Stafford. So Stafford is coming back. Sean McVay talked about Stafford. It's coming back from injury, and I like this schedule. He plays Seattle, then Arizona, and then he's got a week 15 game against Washington. We all saw Sam Howell this week, very, very successful against Seattle. When we go back at the end of the season, Sam Howell is going to be one of the waiver wire hits of the season at the quarterback position. But Matthew Stafford is one you should definitely check on. He's also a buy low for Superflex managers. That's one that I would take a look at. Another quarterback that if you're in a Superflex league, throw out a $0, if your league allows it, bid, maybe a very low 1%, 2% bid on Jameis Winston. It's probably wishful thinking on my part that Jameis Winston's going to get this opportunity. But people talk about the concussion symptoms for Derek Carr. And Derek Carr should be back in week 11 after their bye because the concussion should clear up. But there's also a shoulder issue for Derek Carr. So, like, if you're in a Superflex league and Jameis Winston's available, I want to roster him if I have the space and just hold him through this bye week to see where you're at with Derek Carr. Now, if you get some sort of reports that Derek Carr is absolutely playing in week 12, then, you could probably let go of Winston. But Winston showed a real connection with Chris Olave that we haven't really seen from Derek Carr this year. So it was very frustrating for Chris Olave managers to see Winston come in there, find him in the end zone almost immediately. So I want to keep an eye on Winston. Now, in terms of your league, go through, check out the quarterbacks available to you. There might be some other ones, but for this purposes, in this article this week, this is the least amount of quarterbacks that I've talked about on any of these shows or in this waiver wire article all season long. Hopefully you grab Josh Dobbs. Like Josh Dobbs, if he's somehow available in your league still, like that's awesome. And your league mates are sleeping. But there's, that's kind of wishful thinking. Like guys like Baker Mayfield, Josh Dobbs, they're all rostered in 50% plus of Yahoo leagues. Like they're not just sitting out there in all these leagues these days. So your league, check and see the availability for guys. But if you need help at quarterback, tough one this week. Very, very tough. Pivoting over to the running back position. And I really encourage you guys to watch my sleepers video that comes out at the end of the week right here on Player Profiler YouTube. Usually drop it Thursday, Friday. And also that's an article for the Player Profiler readers. But my sleepers article and video last week, I talked about Ty Chandler. And Ty Chandler was a guy that we talked about as a handcuff plus type because he's going to absorb the Cam Akers touches. Cam Akers is lost to an Achilles injury. Ty Chandler is going to be the next man in. He's got a clear path if anything happens to Alexander Mattison, and also could maybe get a 10 carries or 10 touches type guy, and it happens. So, I didn't think anything would happen with Alexander Mattison, but Alexander Mattison is going to miss this week, it looks like. So Ty Chandler becomes a top 2 waiver wire ad. I don't have him at the very top of my top 10 overall rankings, but if you need running back production, moving him to 1 is fine. And he's the kind of guy that you can put a sizable fab bid on because right now you're paying for wins. And Ty Chandler was pretty much even with Alexander Mattison in terms of usage to start the game. He ends up scoring a touchdown as well, finishes the game with 45 yards and a touchdown. They didn't have to use Ty Chandler in the passing game, but he has that. So Ty Chandler can catch the football. Alexander Mattison, again, has a concussion. Ty Chandler should have a full workload this week in a top offense. It's a primetime game. We're going to get a chance to see Josh Dobbs against the Denver Broncos in primetime. So you should expect Ty Chandler. I mean, I think that he's going to give you 13 to 15 PPR points. And Denver has been a very, very positive matchup for running backs all season long. You saw the success that Latavius Murray had last night. Ty Chandler, that's a guy that you can go out ahead and bid aggressively on. And he's a continual lesson of why we want to roster handcuff running backs whenever we can. Ty Chandler cost you $1 last week. Now he's going to cost you, cost you 1% last week. Now he's going to cost you like 40%. And you're going to see people going absolutely nuts for him on the waiver wire as the season is a lot shorter. The regular season's coming to an end and people need wins. So keep churning that back into your roster. Maybe you want to get the next Ty Chandler. But if you have the fab, you need a running back, go ahead and get him. My other running back that I'm excited about is Kenneth Gainwell. Gainwell scored a touchdown in week 9, caught 5 passes in week 8. He's like always kind of there. Nick Sirianni loves Kenneth Gainwell. And he's got multiple outs here. He is one of the best handcuffs in football, in one of the better offenses in football. He's a like-for-like replacement for DeAndre Swift if Swift misses time. Gainwell can catch the football, and he's also an effective runner. There's also a chance that the running backs are used more in Philly with Dallas Goedert sidelined. So keep an eye on that. Gainwell's got multiple passes this week. Rico Dowdle played great last week. Again, not to keep patting myself on the back, but we talked about him as a guy you could put in your lineup last week in the Sleeper show because he was going to get a ton of opportunities with Dallas being a big favorite and them looking to, close out the entire second half with Rico Dowdle. And it happens. He scores a touchdown last week. He runs for 79 yards. Rico Dowdle being rostered in only 4% of Yahoo leagues is wild. Go ahead and roster Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle showed you last week, this is a guy who can play. If anything happens to Tony Pollard, Rico Dowdle is a guy you're going to immediately plug in your offense. Ask yourself this. If Tony Pollard were to get injured this week, how much fab would you spend on Rico Dowdle? Probably all of it. You would put 75% bid on Rico Dowdle. So why let him sit there on the waiver wire? Keep him on your roster. A lot of your league mates are going to be chasing guys like Ty Chandler and Noah Brown this week. You sit back and go get yourself some Rico Dowdle. Running back wise, listen, we get an offensive coordinator change in Buffalo. So kind of all bets are off. But Leonard Fournette is available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. Latavius Murray had a very good game last night. James Cook had a very good final drive. Do I know what the future will hold for the Buffalo running back position? I don't. But they need to get more running back production on that team for them to be a playoff threat. This is a 5-5 Buffalo Bills. Changes could be made this week. And I look at a guy like Fournette. Fournette was such an effective player for Tampa, was an RB1 last year, an RB1 the year before. He's just sitting there for Buffalo. I think using Leonard Fournette makes some sense. If you don't believe in Leonard Fournette, Latavius Murray played great last night, and Latavius Murray got a lot of work, scored a touchdown last night. He's sitting there on a lot of waiver wires. Who would I rather have rest of the season? I would rather have Leonard Fournette. Latavius Murray is the oldest running back in football, and I believe that Leonard Fournette still has more left than Latavius Murray does. But if you disagree with me, Lat Murray is sitting there on a bunch of waiver wires as well. Playoff Lenny being a thing in Buffalo down the stretch would be a very cool storyline. I mean, or guys, this could all just be a moot point, and the new offensive coordinator could find a way to utilize James Cook. But it looks like the coaching staff is kind of souring on James Cook. Coaches hate fumbles, and that sort of thing resonates. Another running back to talk about, Elijah Mitchell. He had lack of opportunities in a blowout win, which was disappointing. If I tell you the score is 34-3 over Jacksonville, you'd expect a bunch of Elijah Mitchell in the second half, like we saw with Rico Dowdle. That is not it. You also have the fact that Deebo Samuel is getting carries again. Deebo scores a running touchdown. So Elijah Mitchell is really just a contingency play. But the fact that it's San Francisco, one of the best offenses in football and one of the more efficient offenses in football, you kind of have to elevate Mitchell above like a lot of these other handcuff running backs. And he's just sitting there and you can grab him for free. So you talk about our Ty Chandlers, you talk about these guys that are kind of the next man in. Grab an Elijah Mitchell, just throw him on your bench while your league mates ignore him. Other running backs, we'll talk about some handcuffs. I'm going to rip through a bunch of names. Then I'm going to say how many leagues they're rostered in. Joshua Kelly, rostered in 19% of Yahoo leagues. Zamir White, rostered in 2% of Yahoo leagues. Tank Bigsby, rostered in 9% of Yahoo leagues. Travion Williams, rostered in, he's not rostered. Michael Carter, rostered in only 1% of Yahoo leagues. And Jamal Williams, rostered in 23% of Yahoo leagues. If you have roster space, just grab one of these guys. Again, Jamal Williams, less appealing because you're talking about a guy on a bye week. Same thing where you might see Zach Moss cut this week. If Zach Moss gets cut from somebody, then grab him because Zach Moss would be right in the elite handcuff territory. But all of these guys will cost you nothing. And they are the kind of guys that if there's an injury in front of them, they'd become huge, huge, huge fab bids. The least exciting ones on this list, Travion Williams would never be a high volume one. He'd be more of a high-end RB3 if Joe Mixon missed time. And then Zamir White, I'll get pushback on this because Amir Abdullah would get a bunch of touches if Josh Jacobs missed time. And you'd also see Dearness Johnson get some touches if Travis Etienne missed time. But Zamir White and Tank Bigsby would still be the preferable backs to roster in that offense. So this is a good week for you to take a look at these handcuff running backs and grab one of them. Now the wide receiver position becomes a little bit more interesting than the running back position. And I think there's some guys that actually we can use a little bit. Noah Brown is obviously the guy this week. And for me, I have him as the number one waiver wire ad over Ty Chandler, despite the fact that Ty Chandler, I expect to get a full workload. And that's because I think people are kind of underestimating Noah Brown right now. Noah Brown has had an insane 325 receiving yards the past 2 weeks. 325 receiving yards the past 2 weeks. And he's done that on 13 catches. This is wild. And when you look at it, he's benefited from the game flow. There was the wild 39-37 win over Tampa Bay. And then this past week was a 30-27 win over Cincinnati. But Noah Brown is balling. And at the end of the day, it's like, it doesn't matter how he got there. He is here. And I think a lot of fantasy managers will kind of like say, this is a guy where I knew what he was for many years, so he cannot be this. And that sort of thinking can really cloud your judgment in fantasy. And does Noah Brown have the ability to do this every single week? No, not at all. But can Noah Brown be a guy that starts for me for the next few weeks? Yes, he can. To kind of overlook the fantasy production he's having and be like, nah, I don't really want him. He's still Noah Brown. It's just, it's bad thinking. The Houston Texans are in 3 wide receiver sets all the time. Early in the season, we saw some success for Robert Woods. Well, Robert Woods is going to get passed by Noah Brown. So all 3 of these guys are going to be on the field like the whole time. And Devin Singletary had his massive game against Cincinnati, but Houston's not a team that's going to be able to run the ball like that every single week. So they're going to be relying on their wide receivers and Dalton Schultz. They're going to pass a ton. We want Houston Texans in our offense, in our lineup. CJ Stroud is awesome. And Noah Brown is a guy that we can continue using until he starts trailing off. Now, if Noah Brown drops down to like 4 targets and catches like 40 yards, then, we got to adjust things. But right now we have to treat Noah Brown as a high-end wide receiver 3 until we see otherwise. You also have the fact that Nico Collins missed this past week. Did that help Brown's production? Sure. But even when Nico comes back, I don't think this is going to go away. They brought Noah Brown in as a free agent this offseason. Like Dalton Schultz, they went out and got him from Dallas Cowboys. And Noah Brown's always been like a big-time athlete. We're finally seeing it out on the field this year. It's very exciting stuff. He was like found money for you if you got him on the waiver wire last week. And we had him highly ranked last week as well. So this is not like the production was shocking. We didn't think he'd have this many receiving yards. But the fact that he produced is not shocking at all. He's my number 1 waiver wire addition this week with Ty Chandler at the number 2 spot. Another wide receiver that I feel like I've talked about every single week, either in the sleeper video or here on the waiver wire video, is Jayden Reed. And he's rostered in only 21% of Yahoo leagues. So I'm thinking this is probably the last time I ever get a chance to talk about him, as I expect him to go over a higher threshold than we want to talk about on this video. But Jayden Reed has had 83 or more yards in 2 of his last 3 games. What's going on with Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs? Neither one of these guys are it. I think Jayden Reed by the end of the season is going to be the Green Bay Packer wide receiver you want in your lineup. And he's just sitting there on so many waiver wires. And even this week, he's not going to be like a top ad. People are going to be chasing guys like Noah Brown. So Jayden Reed is one that I really want to get. He's got speed. He is explosive. And they have a very good schedule down the stretch where a receiver can make an impact down the stretch. I think it's going to be Jayden Reed. I like him a lot. Go out and get him. Another rookie wide receiver available in 88% of Yahoo leagues. That's Michael Wilson. And I had Michael Wilson here last week in the waiver wire article, and I had him in my sleepers video, and he nearly scored a touchdown, tackled at the 1-yard line, but he was targeted 6 times in Kyler Murray's first game back. I think that he's going to have some good games down the stretch with Murray. Murray looked really, really good. Murray looks like he didn't lose a step. Looking at Michael Wilson. Another player that's been good for us the last few weeks, Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is available still in 82% of Yahoo leagues. Again, I don't know what the coordinator change is gonna make for a guy like Khalil Shakir, but I'm intrigued by him. We saw him have a 6-catch, 92-yard game a couple weeks back. Khalil Shakir available in a bunch of leagues. A guy, if I need short-term help, Trenton Irwin. He's available in 92% of Yahoo leagues. And not to keep patting myself on the back, but we had Trenton Irwin in our sleepers video recommending him as a guy you could pick up and use this week if you were in a bind with T. Higgins missing. And Irwin ends up catching 2 passes for 54 yards, but he scores a touchdown. He should get another spot start on Thursday night against Baltimore. And Baltimore is a difficult matchup, but Baltimore just allowed 30-plus to Cleveland. It's a short turnaround. Cincinnati-Baltimore games are going to be very good. Expect for Irwin to get, Irwin's not a guy that you're going to put in your lineup and expect him to score a touchdown every week. But I think Irwin's going to get you 10 PPR points this week against Baltimore. And for some of you, that might be what you need to get through the week. So if it's something where I have a long-term need, he's not your guy. But if it's a short-term need, Trenton Irwin is your guy. Got to talk about Marvin Mims. Very disappointing. Looks so explosive as a return man. Not getting the usage as a wide receiver. I wrote this article before Monday Night Football. I thought that there could be a big usage increase for Marvin Mims. There was not. So that's very, very disappointing. You can leave him on the wire, but he is available in 88% of Yahoo leagues. He's had a 113-yard performance, a 73-yard performance. I think he's very talented, but again, it's hard to hold these guys and wait for them. But if you're in a deeper format, go out and get yourself some Marvin Mims. Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham is available in 74% of Yahoo leagues. He scored a touchdown in back-to-back games. The volume has been inconsistent. Gets 7 targets in week 9, only 2 targets in week 10, but he finds the end zone. Let's see how he does this week against Cincy in terms of targets and usage. If it's more like the 7-target game in week 9 than the 2-target game in week 10, then we can consider using Beckham against the Chargers in week 12. The Chargers game is like the dream matchup. Baltimore and the Chargers, that's a game where you want to start your Ravens. So if you have room on your roster, grab Beckham. I don't really want to put him in the lineup against Cincinnati unless I'm in like a huge bind. But if you see him get a volume increase, then we'll consider using him against the Chargers in week 12. We've got to talk about Rondell Moore. Rondell Moore, Hollywood Brown did not really do much. So I don't know if this was a benefit of Hollywood Brown not doing a whole lot, but Rondell Moore in Kyler Murray's first game back had season highs in yardage with 43, catches with 5, and targets with 8. If I need somebody who's a longer-term stash, I'm looking at Michael Wilson. But if I need somebody this week and I'm in a complete bind, I'm looking at Rondell Moore. He'll be in my sleepers video as well this week. Pivoting over to the tight end position. At the tight end position this week, it's pretty interesting. Like, we don't have a Trey McBride type. And that's another guy that we recommended on this waiver wire show that just blew up. So it's really nice when you see the guys like Stroud, Sam Howell, Devin Singletary, Tank Dell, Trey McBride. You love seeing the guys that you picked up on waivers early in the year and you recommend as waiver wire additions, just smashing. So Trey McBride, if you picked him up, hopefully you got that, you watched this video, read my article, and you aggressively picked up Trey McBride. We had him as the number one waiver wire ad available a few weeks back. Hopefully you added him and you're enjoying your success. I know in leagues where I had him last week, it was awesome. But we don't have a guy like that this week. But we do have one player that we got to talk about. And I was able to pick him up in an NFFC league. So some people will say, whoa, not in my league, bro. This guy's been rostered all season long. He's on somebody's IR spot. I get it. Pat Frymouth is only available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. But again, I added him in a high stakes league where you have 20 roster spots. So I know that he's available in some places. And Frymouth, he's a guy where maybe in leagues where there was no IR spots, he was cut. Maybe people just didn't like the production early on. But Frymouth is sitting there, and apparently he's going to come back from injury soon, if not this week. And the Steelers passing game could absolutely use him. They were abysmal this past week in the passing game. Kenny Pickett had less than 130 yards passing, and Pittsburgh still wins the game because Najee Harris and Jalen Warren were both so effective running the ball, and their defense can play. But when Frymouth returns, I refuse to believe that he's not going to make some sort of a fantasy impact for the rest of the season. He struggled at the start of the season in terms of seeing like his usual target volume, but he did have 2 touchdown catches. Frymouth is a guy that's like top 10 all time in terms of targets for a tight end in their first 2 seasons in the league. And I believe he's also top 10 all time in terms of tight end catches for a player in their first two seasons in the league. Like, Frymouth had a lot of fantasy success for 2 straight seasons. Now he comes back from injury, a chance to make an impact. Go grab some Frymouth if he's available. A player that's available still in 77% of Yahoo leagues, and you're probably bored of hearing me talk about him, and this is probably the last week I'm going to be able to talk about him, is Luke Musgrave. Luke Musgrave, I think he's going to start ripping off some big games. I just have this feeling when you watch him play, he's a very athletic player, a big target, and again, the wide receivers are not producing like we want in Green Bay. So Musgrave, over the past 2 weeks, he has 115 receiving yards and a touchdown. He had 64 receiving yards this past week against Pittsburgh. That was a career high for him. He's got speed. He's got athletic ability. He's on the field the whole time. Go grab some Luke Musgrave. If I have a very good tight end, I want to still add Musgrave because I don't want somebody to be in my league to grab him for cheap. And then a couple weeks from now, they have like tight end 9, tight end 10, that they got for cheap and they're able to use. So Musgrave is also a very fun tight end 2 for deeper league managers, or if you can afford to just roster 2 tight ends, grab yourself some Luke Musgrave. My guy, Cade Otton, available in 78% of Yahoo leagues. Fantasy dud. He didn't do anything against Tennessee. Tennessee has been very good against tight ends all season long, and the game flow and matchup really didn't help. K. Dotton does well in these like neutral game scripts where he gets the targets. In the previous 3 games to this, though, he was targeted at least 6 times in every single game. And we saw him have that huge game in the loss to Houston where he had the best game he's had all time. So Otten, again, a second-year player. He's on the field the entire time. We've seen him have at least 6 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. A lot of fantasy managers who picked him up last week might just drop him after the dud against Tennessee. So keep an eye on him and see if he's dropped and then pick him up. He's going to be like a high-end tight end 2 for the rest of the season. A guy to stash, Michael Mayer. Mayer saw an uptick in usage with 5 targets. And that's nothing to be like excited about, but 5 targets was the most targets he's had since week 6. I still think that Las Vegas is figuring out what they are with Aiden O'Connell and Antonio Pierce in like this new era. I think they're still kind of figuring it out. Michael Mayer still has the annoying presence of Austin Hooper around him. But if we can start turning like a 5-target week into like 7 targets, 6 targets like every week, kind of like what we get with Otten, Mayer could be interesting. So he's a stash. Don't play him, just stash him. A player where if I'm in a absolute tight end emergency this week that's out there and available in 89% of Yahoo leagues is Tyler Conklin. Conklin's back on our radars because he had 13 catches his last 2 games. He's always one of our favorite like break glass in case of emergency floor plays at tight end, but he's had 13 catches the last 2 weeks. So you're starting to see it. The Jets offense is very predictable. It's a lot of Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is the only receiver you want to start, but if you need another Jet, it's Tyler Conklin. And then for FFPC managers, keep an eye on Tanner Hudson. You can play it this way. Add Tanner Hudson for $1. Keep him on your bench, and if he completely duds out on Thursday night, go add somebody else in the secondary waiver wire that runs, on Sunday morning. Hudson seems to have passed Irv Smith on the depth chart. And you're like, whoa, this guy Tanner Hudson, who is this rookie that Cincinnati has? No, he's old. Tanner Hudson's old too. He's like 29. But he is passing to Irv Smith on the depth chart. He's had 12 targets his last 2 games. And it seems like, much like Irwin, he was a slight beneficiary of T. Higgins missing. You also had the fact that Cincinnati was trailing, which also could have been a big beneficiary to Hudson. So if he does literally 0 against Baltimore, then this is a guy that you just wasted 30 seconds of your life listening to me talk about. And I wasted, 15 minutes of my life writing about him in this article and talking about him here. But maybe he becomes a thing. I would bet against it. But again, when it comes to the tight end position in tight end premium formats, we don't want to put our noses in the air at 12 targets over the past 2 weeks, especially when it's a Joe Burrow-led offense. And then my overall top 10 rankings. Top 10 at the top, Noah Brown, easy. Ty Chandler, easy. Top 2 is very, very clear. Noah Brown and Ty Chandler, and then there's like a teardrop. Kenneth Gainwell, I would put at number 3, based on the quality of the Philadelphia offense and the fact that I think he could be sneaky for short-term usage as well as contingent upside if Swift were to miss time. Number 4, Leonard Fournette. I put him in there because I want to have him on my bench. I will also include a slash Latavius Murray here. Go out and get one of the old running backs on Buffalo if they're on your waiver wire. Bet on changes with the new offensive coordinator. So Leonard Fournette slash Latavius Murray at 4. Jaden Reed at number 5. Love Jaden Reed. 6, Pat Freiermuth. 7, Luke Musgrave. 8, Rico Dowdle. Love getting Rico Dowdle this week, guys. This is a high-end handcuff, and I think your league mates are going to let him slip through the cracks again, despite him scoring a touchdown. Rico Dowdle at 8. Trenton Irwin, your short-term plug-and-play wide receiver at 9. And then my guy, K. Otten, at 10. So again, Noah Brown, Ty Chandler, Kenneth Gainwell, Leonard Fournette slash Latavius Murray tied for 4. Jaden Reed at 5, Pat Fryermuth at 6, Luke Musgrave at 7, Rico Dowdle at 8, Trenton Irwin at 9, and Cade Otten at 10. I am Theo Gremminger. You can find all of my written work at playerprofiler.com. You can find videos like this that I drop throughout the week. Look at my 2-minute drill, which is my fantasy takeaways from the weekend. I dropped that yesterday. You can find that right here at Player Profiler YouTube. And then check out my podcast this week. Jeff Erickson is coming on First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio and I. That should be a very fun one. Jacob Sanderson is coming on press coverage with me. That's Wednesday. First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio is always on Thursdays. And then check out Dynasty Life. That's my new Dynasty podcast. Heath Cummings of CBS, who's really, really good, is coming on with me on Friday. Stick with us here at Player Profiler all season long. We've got you covered. Videos like this, articles, podcasts, you name it. And check out The Dominator on Saturday evenings with Bradley Stalder and Billy Muzio for any lineup questions you have. They post a link. Put your lineup question out there, and definitely tune in for that one. If you like this video, please subscribe and definitely hit the like button. Let's crush it this week. It's time to win some leagues. It's time to win some money. It's almost Thanksgiving. It's time to ramp these things up, man. This season's going to be over before you know it. Let's get it.